Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Jeremy Paz's senior recital. It's amazing. Those of you that are, fortunate enough to have received an invite that are here tonight know the journey this has been for Jeremy. That's an understatement, right? This has been a long time coming. For those that don't know me, my name is Jonathan Witham. I've been Jeremy's percussion instructor since 2013. And I was trying to work through what to say, and I realized I could probably talk for about half an hour about all the things that I've witnessed and the growth. But really, it's just been a privilege. It's been one of the greatest gifts to me as an instructor I have received in doing this for the better part of 15 years. And I had a front row seat to watching Jeremy develop this work ethic and tenacity as he wanted to prove once and for all that he had the ability to become not only the incredible kit player that we know him to be, but he wanted to become a world-class percussionist as well. So this is kind of the final step as he closes one chapter here at William Jessup University and launches from here into whatever the Lord has for him. Couple things. One, phones. You all know the drill. Not silent. Just airplane mode. Commit. Just, don't mess around. Two, this is going to be a little different for those of you that have been to recitals like this in the past. This is going to be more of a lecture-style hybrid recital to where Jeremy's actually giving you context. He's going to discuss technique. He's going to actually give you a performer's perspective into each piece. So you're in for a real treat. Go ahead and help me welcome Jeremy Paz.
Hey guys. Hope we're all doing well. Thank you so much for coming. As Jonathan said, this has been a long time coming for me. It's been about 5 years since I started working on this recital. And over the years, it's kind of taken a different form. And like Jonathan said, this is a bit of a lecture performance hybrid. So I will give a lot of insight onto some of the compositions that I will be performing for you guys this evening. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first piece that I will be performing for you guys is it's a piece called Opus for Conga 1 by the great percussionist George Gaber. Can you guys hear me without the mic? Yeah. I think I'm just going to go without the mic. I think it's a little bit of a hassle, and I can talk with my hands a little bit better. Pardon me. All right, this feels a lot more comfortable. Cool. So this piece by George Gaber called Opus for Conga 1 actually started as more of a composition more for the practice of percussionists getting better and better. And some kind of background info on George Gaber. He was a very well-known percussionist that performed with ABC, NBC, and CBS orchestras, with the Boston Symphony, Israel Philharmonic, and countless other symphonies and orchestras and whatnot, especially in the 30s and 40s and 50s. One of his greatest attributes was his dedication as an instructor and as a professor. In the 60s, he actually wound up going to a school called Indiana University, and his task was to create a new and basically build from the ground up an entire percussion department and curriculum. And one of the things that really made his department at Indiana University stand out and would grab attention from students from all over the world was his dedication to the utmost excellence. George Gaber had a lot of well-known students that would go on to do really great things in the world of jazz and world percussion, and even becoming percussion instructors themselves. One of those people was someone by the name of Ross Sears, who wound up being able to teach percussion at Cal Poly SLO in San Luis Obispo. And what's been cool is that Gaber passed on this percussion piece onto Ross, in which in turn Ross would pass on to those students. One of those students being Jonathan Witham, my drum instructor. And as Jonathan has taught various drummers and percussionists over the past 15 some odd years, he wound up eventually passing this composition on down to me. So there's a bit of a really cool legacy with this kind of composition. And what makes it that much more special is the fact that it's not published. So there aren't many percussionists that even know that this piece exists. And I think there's something, special about that. And there's almost this there's a different spirit with this kind of composition that has become one of my most favorite and treasured percussion pieces that I've been able to ever play. It's just very sentimental to me. And for those who were here for my junior recital back in 2016, this might be a very familiar piece for you because I did perform it at that time too. And I wanted to do it again because it was a piece that I think really helped me to stand out in my journey through Jessup and as a percussionist. And it was definitely one of the more memorable ones that I've ever done. And I figured doing it a second time around, I'd be able to have a fresh take on this kind of piece. I'm going to get into some of the techniques that I utilize for this composition. But one of the first things that I wanted to bring up, which if you're a percussionist, you might recognize, the piece is called Opus for Conga. This is not a conga by any means. This is an African drum called a djembe. It's a bit of more of a modern one. And the reason why I chose this over a conga was actually inspired by Jonathan because he wound up doing the same thing when he performed this when he was at Cal Poly. The djembe has a lot wider of a range as far as frequencies go. So the lower frequencies are a lot lower and a lot more full, a lot boomier, so to say, while the higher frequencies are much higher. There's a lot more articulation. So the dynamic range on this instrument is much greater than, in my opinion, than it would be on a conga. And so some of the important notes that I would be playing on this drum to get some of the lower notes, be playing in the center. Sometimes I'll play with an open hand and get a nice low sound that way. With this particular piece, I found that it actually sounds a little bit more cohesive with some of the higher notes if I cup the hand rather than have it open. It's a little bit more solid, not as much of the higher frequencies. It's a little bit more contained, and it helps to make a lot of my phrasing a little bit more articulate and a bit clearer for you guys to be able to understand and to be able to take in. To contrast such a low tone, I usually have my hand ready, my right hand ready, and my left hand covering the top of the head to dampen it a bit. And I'll strike at the very edge with my, I guess, the top knuckles of my fingers, like that, to get a really sharp sound. And that, in contrast, with the low boom, there's a nice spread of frequencies there. And then another tone that I utilize is a very open tone with just my hands, sometimes just part of my fingers at the sides or most of my hand, kind of at the 5 and 8 p.m., 8 o'clock zones. And so these are getting just the overall frequencies that are available in this kind of drum. It's a very open sound, a very robust sound. And so utilizing stuff like this, you can really come up with a lot of awesome rhythms and add a lot of intrigue to what's being performed. And then one of the cool things that I like to do, and I think what was selling me with this particular composition, is the use of pitch bending. Now, when you hear the drum open, it's all the same pitch, relatively speaking, within a frequency spectrum. But if you were to take, say, your elbow, place it on the head, and you start to increase pressure, as you're hitting it, you're starting to raise the pitch of the entire drum. And so you'll hear this technique used a lot in this particular piece. So without further ado, here's Opus for Conga 1. was a pretty fun piece, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of fun. A little too painful, but fun. This next piece that I want to talk about a little bit is probably one of the most interesting percussion compositions I've ever come across. There's quite literally nothing like it. It's a composition known as Wicca. This particular composition has probably been the single toughest one that I've ever had to learn. And I've spent the past few years really trying to hone in on it. There's a lot of weird techniques that are a bit unorthodox, so to say, for a lot of these kinds of percussion compositions. To give some background on this, and especially on the composer, Cangelosi, he is what people would call, especially in his circle, the Paganini of percussion. And some would often call him the voice of a new generation when it comes to percussion compositions and just taking percussion as a whole to a whole new level. He's won numerous awards for his compositions and is regularly commissioned to write and compose music for ensembles or soloists, universities, institutions, colleges, you name it. There's a long list of people that he's composed for. And part of the reason why he is always contracted for this kind of stuff is because he has a very specific writing style. Quite literally, no one else composes the way that he does. And when I perform it for you guys in a few minutes, you'll understand why. Now, when you hear the title Wicca, you might start asking yourself, okay, we're at a Christian university. Something seems kind of weird. Wicca makes me think of witchcraft. Kind of, is it demonic? What's going on? Why are you performing this? Kind of unorthodox, you know. What Cangelosi was trying to do was take the vision of like witchcraft and seances and rituals, and sometimes we think of making potions or some sort of witch's brew in a cauldron, and trying to put that together in a composition, or what we would call as musicians a tone poem. Now, with a tone poem, the whole point is to capture an essence of a particular thing, or to try to express a story of some kind through melodies, through timbre, through all sorts of rhythms, time signatures. You're trying to paint a picture from a musical perspective that words aren't sufficient for. And Cangelosi utilizes all kinds of weapons, so to say, when it comes to this composition. There's some of the weirdest time signatures I've ever come across. Some very difficult rhythms that, when played continuously, have some sort of a almost trance-like quality to them. I think the biggest thing that just really plays into the kind of eclectic, very weird nature of this composition is the use of timbre. Now, I'm going to step back here for a sec and kind of demonstrate a few different techniques that I'm having to employ when performing this piece. Now, the first one that kind of gives you the vibe of a witch maybe stirring something in a giant cauldron is a conga scrape. Now, I'm taking a triangle beater, which you would think, okay, yeah, you hit the triangle, great, awesome, cool. Why do I need to know about that? Turns out, if you take something like a triangle beater, place it on the conga, move it in a circle, it's got a bit of a eeriness to it, almost as if you actually are, trying to create some sort of magic potion of some kind, channel your inner witch, and speed it up if you really feel like you have to mix a lot of stuff in it. It can be abrupt, it can be nice and slow if you want to take your time. Isn't that nice? And so I'm having to utilize that quite a bit in this piece, and it's honestly a nice texture. If you want something similar, that's maybe not as harsh to the ears, a little bit softer, what Cangelosi also has me do, and has any percussionist do when performing this piece, you take a wire brush that you'd use for a drum set or anything, kind of do the same thing, but do it on this giant bass drum that I have over here. This one actually I think sounds pretty cool. Not that this one isn't. This one's cooler though. If I really want to add to that effect, do both at once while trying to stay on Conga. Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty simple technique. This next one in particular took me quite a while just to try to get down. In my music, there is notation for a one-handed bongo roll. Now, when you think of doing a roll with one hand, you see people when they're doing any sort of drum roll, usually two hands with hands themselves or with sticks. But because I have to do it with one hand, I must be already doing a bunch of stuff with my left hand, or vice versa. And so what I'm having to do is hold, say, a timbale stick right around the middle, and while I'm hitting one drum here, when I have to go back up to hit it again, I'm using the back side of the stick to hit the other. So at a slow tempo, you got that kind of thing going on. Speed it up a little bit. You got a one-handed bongo roll. Now you see that also on the bass drum. Same thing, just on one drum that's really, really big. It's really great if you want to add a lot of sound and a lot of volume and really make things kind of hectic. And one of the things I noticed about doing these one-handed rolls, either on the bongos or on this massive bass drum, is that it adds a lot of tension. If you're to hear it for a long period of time, no matter what I'm doing with my other hand, you kind of start to feel a little stressed, a little anxious, right? Like if I were to try to talk to you, you just hear this the whole time. It's kind of stressful, yeah? Yeah, pretty stressful. I don't want to do that for too long either. It's driving me nuts. But it adds to the huge range of dynamic in this composition. This composition is going to start in a very calm, just simple stirring of the pot manner. But as it moves along and the dynamics kind of ebb and flow here and there, you're going to start to get to a point where towards the climax it's about to get very and very intense and stressful. So just allow yourself to kind of come along for the ride. Now let's just all put this all together. So without further ado, I present to you Wicca. Once I fix my music. guys so much. That piece got a little stressful at times, didn't it? It's a little kind of disorients you a bit. This final tune that I'm going to be doing is one that I think I've been really looking forward to the most, in the sense that it's on an instrument I'm most familiar with, and I'm doing it with people who I truly love and cherish the most. And so while said people and while my band is going ahead and taking their place, the tune that I want to introduce you to is a tune called Got a Match by Chick Corea. Now, when I was originally planning this recital, I was very gung-ho at first about doing a bunch of drum set rep, and I had 4 to 6 different full band tunes that I wanted to do. And as I was finalizing this recital with Jonathan and with Tom, we were able to narrow it down to me doing one band tune. And so the hard thing about that was trying to choose between the 4 to 6 songs that I had originally planned. They were all really cool in their own way, and they were all very special. And so I was bummed. Like, oh man, I really wanted to do all this stuff on drum kit. But this particular tune stood out to me for a number of reasons. The first being, it's a tune that highlights every single member of the band here in their abilities. And I wanted to do something that wouldn't just highlight what I'm doing on the kit, even though I know, yes, it's Jeremy Paz's senior recital. We get that. This is as much my recital, and especially with this particular tune, as it is for these guys. And I want to be able to highlight each and every single one of them. And so there's going to be an opportunity where throughout the tune, we're going to be trading solos. So you'll hear a keys solo, you'll hear a bass solo, you'll hear a ripping guitar solo, and obviously as my recital, I'll have a chance to play too. So this is more of a tune that we all get to have our share of musical communication with. The second one, being more of a recent thing within this past year, is with a legendary jazz musician and explorer of jazz and classical music, as Chick Corea. Earlier this year, he unfortunately passed away at the age of 79, and he left a massive legacy and a massive catalog of music, and has inspired countless generations of musicians, including myself. Chick Corea was actually his music was what got me into jazz and jazz fusion to begin with. So this particular tune is a very special one for me, in that it pays tribute to such a great musician and person that we, as a human race, have been blessed with, especially when it comes to the culture of jazz. Yeah, it's still weird to know that he, as great of a musician and as a mentor he has been for so many others, that he's not here. It would feel wrong to not perform one of his tunes. And so, yeah, there's a huge sentimental value, especially with this particular tune. This was the first Chick Corea tune I'd ever heard. And this was the thing that really kickstarted my passion for jazz, especially jazz fusion, jazz rock. I just find that stuff a lot of fun to play, especially behind the drum kit. Yeah, and so I want to be able to share this tune with you guys. And I want to explain a little bit how this song format is structured as I get ready behind the kit. Now, when you have a tune where we're doing a lot of solos and everyone gets to be free to express themselves in however way they see fit behind their instrument of choice, sometimes we can get very lost in it and just so into the ripping solos that are happening that we might not always know how to get back into a very structured format. Because with any sort of jazz tune, especially jazz fusion, there's usually a main theme that you will hear throughout the
once we play it, you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly what it is. But one thing that is very important when it comes to trading solos and figuring out where we're going from there is being able to have a musical cue to get us out of a solo back into, say, the main theme or the main melody of the song. So Jason, if you wouldn't mind. So that collection of notes right there is something that every single member of this band is going to play at the end of their solo to cue everyone else back in to the main theme. And so the journey that each musician takes to get to that cue is going to look very different, as you'll hear in just a second. But I really want to challenge you guys to listen for that as much as you can, so that you are able to track along with us as far as, you know, where we're going in the song. And I know with a melodic line like that, it's easy for guitar, it's easy for bass, relatively speaking, and it's easy for keys to be able to play the same exact melody. But on the drum set, I don't necessarily have what you would call notes, as at least according to what everyone else has. So a way that I've adapted my playing in a way to be able to cue everyone else back in, aside from just saying the 1, 2, 3, 4 classic thing that everyone seems to do. Jason, go ahead and play that lick again. Yeah, so what I tend to do is something, I take that same rhythm and I just try to find a melodic way to play it on a kit that doesn't necessarily have what we might think as notes. So something like that might be translated as that's a very basic way to do it. You'll hear that I'll embellish it a little bit more. Something along those lines. Again, you can hear the cues from all these musicians here. It'll be a real challenge to try to hear it with the kit, but do your best you can to hear it. It's going to be a really fun tune. It's going to be kind of wild, so just brace yourselves for that. And yeah, here we go. Chick Corea's God Match.
like I said earlier, this has been a long time coming. I've been at the school for longer than I'd care to admit. Most of you guys know how long I've been here. And I've gone through a lot of very difficult circumstances to get to where I am today. And every single one of you here today has been a huge part of that journey, whether it's been for a short time or it's been for my entire life. You know, every single one of you guys means so much to me. For those who are watching, all you guys mean a lot to me as well. And I thank you that you're watching this and experiencing this with me. There are refreshments and snacks in the back if you guys want to hang out and chat with me or chat amongst yourselves and enjoy cookies and water and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I'm so grateful that you guys are all here. Once again, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a wonderful night.